Hello and welcome to ExegeTV, the show that helps you move from exegesis to explanation. I'm Michael Halcomb. In this brief episode, I want to offer some thoughts on how a week-to-week preacher, that is, a week in and a week out preacher, might decide which text he or she will be preaching from. Of course, that assumes that the scriptures are central to one's preaching. Moving on though, having been in ministry for just about 5 years now, I can attest to the fact that if you have no plan when sermon preparation time rolls around every week, you'll spend much of that time that could be devoted to study and research and prayer trying to pick a text. And that is a practice I think preachers and a language that I think preachers should stay away from, picking a text. When you pick one text out of many, you run the great risk of committing eisegesis, conferring your own meaning onto the text rather than letting it speak out of its own world. Then, if you have a plan. But here are a couple of ideas that might help you out. One, use the lectionary. The lectionary is a preaching aid that follows the liturgical year and aims in just a few years' time span to work through the majority of the Bible, the Hebrew Scriptures, and the New Testament. If you follow the lectionary, it'll give you just a few texts to work from each week. This saves you the headache of having to choose a text, and it also challenges you to preach texts that you might have been inclined to overlook. Two, and my preference, is to plan my own yearly or annual schedule. And I think it should be a tight schedule, but one that can also be modified when and if necessary. In a year, I can preach all the way through two of Paul's small letters like Galatians and Ephesians. I've done that. Or perhaps one of the Gospels. The point, though, is to get into one book, one writing, and to stay there, to not leave it. A big mistake, in my opinion, that many preachers make is to scripture hop, is what I'll call it. They go from one passage in Scripture to the next, to the next, to the next, treating the Bible like it's full of fortune cookies. In planning ahead and in preaching through one work at a time, rarely ever leaving that work, your next week's text is already chosen for you. Also, you become familiar with the overall context of one work, and that work within the entire canon. You begin to also see the structure of that work more clearly. You see the small connections and the big connections within it, which is very important. Just as well, you're forced to research and you're forced to preach those hard texts in that writing, which, again, you might have otherwise glossed over. Another thing that this does is to bring continuity to all of your sermons, your teachings, and to your congregation's learnings. One of the most important things that this has helped me to do is to slow down in my reading, to digest what I'm reading, to read it slowly, and to do what I refer to as living in the text, or living with the text. When you live with the text, you begin to really get to know the person who was writing it, and you begin to know the world out of which that person wrote. Hope that helps.